Chapter 12. The ship's bell was ringing at 6:30, brought the crew springing to life. But John was so dead asleep that he heard nothing. Shouted commands of "All hands ahoy! Up hammocks ahoy!" and the shrill blasts of the boatswain's whistle barely penetrated his dreams. He came to with a start as a painful tap from someone's rattan cane landed with a thwack on his back. "Show a leg! Out or down! Jump to it!" He rolled over, trying to sit up at the same time. The hammock twisted out from under him, and he landed painfully on the hard wooden floor of the deck. Kit, Tom, and Davy were already fully dressed. Their blankets were stowed neatly in their hammocks, which had been unhooked from the beams, and they were folding them up, lacing them into tight, neat rolls. John hastily tried to copy them, made a mess of it, and started again. "Like this," Tom said, pushing him out the way and rolling John's hammock himself. Kit and Davy had already disappeared, their rolled hammocks under their arms. "Come on, quick," Tom said. "We've to put them away before Mr. Torse inspects us. You'll not want to be there when he finds out it's not all to his satisfaction." The last wisps of sleepiness cleared from John's head as he dashed away in Tom's wake. A moment later, he was on deck. The cold shock of fresh air was like a douche of water. He gasped as it hit him and drew deep, sweet breaths into his lungs. The deck was crowded with barefooted men, bleary-eyed, red-nosed, many barely recovered from the drunkenness of yesterday. They were yawning and scratching, bad-tempered and mostly silent. Between them stalked the officers, blue-coated, gold-braided, and commanding, ropes on the end of their hands. Another whistle howled through the morning air. "All hands make sail! Man the rigging!" A shudder seemed to run up through the ship, from bows to stern, as hundreds of men swarmed up the rigging to unloose the sails from the great yards from which they were suspended. It was clear that the women and the traders, the visitors and hangers-on, had left the Fearless during the night, shaken out of her like fleas from a blanket. One last small boatload of women was being rowed hastily ashore. They were waving with cheerful desperation to the ship, but the men on board, transforming themselves rapidly from a drunken rabble to a disciplined, efficient force, seemed to have forgotten them already. All around John, men were hauling on ropes or letting them out. Covers were being lashed down, tackle and gear were being lifted and moved. From below came the sound of 50 men's voices singing as they laboured to turn the vast spokes of a great winch to pull up the anchor. "Bosun, start that man!" came a booming cry from above. Looking up, John saw Captain Bannerman standing, legs apart, arms crossed, behind a rail of the quarter-deck. He shrank against the netted hammocks as the boatswain, a terrifying figure in a black-brimmed leather hat, bore down on him, his cane raised. He put up his arms to fend off the expected blow, but the boatswain surged past him and brought his cane down with a crack on the back of the man who had been leaning woozily against the mainmast. John looked round for Tom, but he had disappeared. A shout from above of "Away aloft!" made him glance up, and his heart lurched with fright as he saw Tom far, far above his head, climbing like a monkey up the ladder-like rungs of the rigging. "Here, boy, get up there and pass the brace through the bullseye," said a gruff voice behind him. John spun round. The instruction had come from a heavy-set sailor, whose sleeves were rolled up to reveal a mermaid tattoo on each massive forearm, and who was hauling on a rope nearby. A brace?" stammered John. "I don't know, I'm new." "Damn your eyes! Get below and stay out the way," the man said with a scowl. Hastily, John obeyed. On the covered gun deck below, the wild scenes of yesterday were impossible to imagine now. Men were on their hands and knees scrubbing the boards with big flat stones. Others were washing the tables and stowing away chests. Mr. Torse, looking taller somehow, stern, almost alarming, in his cocked hat and full gold braid, was inspecting the guns down the length of the ship. Jabez Barton, following gravely in his wake, his head permanently bowed beneath the low ceiling. John hovered uncertainly, not knowing how to employ himself. He didn't wish to seem idle. He didn't know where to go or what to do. Fortunately, Mr. Torse, who was now far down the gun deck, looked round and saw him. He beckoned, and John ran up to him. "You'll start your new duties with me this afternoon." Mr. Torse was brisk and impatient this morning. "In the meantime, you must begin to acquaint yourself with the workings of the ship." He pointed to the nearest companionway. "Get yourself up there. Now, Mr. Higgins is ready to show you the ropes." "Mr. Higgins, sir?" John's heart had skipped a beat. Mr. Torse was staring at him, his brow was raised, as he waited disapprovingly for John's obedient response. "Aye, aye, sir," John said, taking a deep breath. Mr. Torse had already turned back to the gun he was inspecting, pointing out a fault to its crew, who were listening and nodding respectfully. John was now used to the ladder-like companionways that connected the decks, and he was already learning to run up and down them with ease. But his palms were clammy with dread, and his feet nearly slipped on the rungs as he emerged onto the deck of the forecastle above. In spite of his fear, he couldn't help giving a gasp of surprise. During the few minutes that he had been below, the vast white sails of the Fearless had all been set, and the ship was fully under way, the wind catching at the canvas, thrusting the bows forwards through the cold green water. He looked up. Men were still up there, working above the sails along the yards, right to the very tips. They stood on nothing more solid than ropes, and seemed to be dancing on the wind, creatures of air, miraculously keeping their balance as the ship rose and fell beneath them. The sight of them made John dizzy. I couldn't. Never. I couldn't ever go up there, John thought with a shiver of dread. "You, John Barr." He spun round. Mr. Higgins was standing behind him, holding his rattan in one hand and bringing it down with smart, threatening taps onto the palm of the other. "You're going to learn the ropes from me, boy." He spoke with malicious satisfaction. "And once I've finished with you, you ain't never going to forget them again." John swallowed hard. "No, sir. I mean, yes, sir." Mr. Higgins' hand shot out, and he took hold of John's ear in a painful grip. "There is nothing you can hide from me," he hissed. "I'll discover all your secrets. In the end, you'll be glad to give me what you know is not yours." Mr. Erskine appeared on the quarter-deck at the far end of the ship, and seemed about to approach the forecastle along the linking gangway. Mr. Higgins released John's ear and stepped back. "The forestay sail halyard," he barked, tapping his finger against the rope. "Say it." The forestay," stammered John. "Forestay sail halyard." The prompt came with a vicious cut from the rattan. Forestay sail halyard," John managed to say. The next hour was the most painful that John had ever spent in his life. He danced the end of Mr. Higgins's cane, while the names of the ropes, strange words he had never heard before, were barked in his ear. With each hesitation came a painful swipe at the rattan. The sailors, working at different tasks on the deck nearby, smiled as he passed, remembering their own first lessons in seamanship. While one of them was watching, the flicks from the rattan were bearable. But, as soon as the sailor's attention was elsewhere, Mr. Higgins sent the cuts raining down hard on John's head, across his back and arms, wherever they would inflict the most pain. "You will report to me here tomorrow at the same time," he said at last, releasing John with a final crack across the shoulders. "And if so be you can't tell me the names of every rope, faultless as I points to it." He left the threat unfinished, to let John's imagination do its worst. As John stumbled down towards his berth again, he caught the sight of Nate Claypole. A smirk of triumph lifted Nate's mouth at the sight of John's face. John turned away, biting his lip till it almost bled. The long morning had ended at last. Whistles blew as the men were piped to dinner. From one end of the gun decks to the other, legless tables, which had been pegged to the beams, came rattling down between the guns, and, a few minutes later, almost the entire ship's crew were sitting down around them, waiting while one man from each table went to the galley to fetch the food. A sigh of relaxation seemed to run along the length of the ship. The boys felt it too. The dinner of oatmeal porridge, bread, cheese and ale was not very inviting, but they fell upon it with sharp appetites. "Learning the ropes, was you, John?" said Davy, wiping his mouth with the back of his cane. "I seen Mr. Higgins after you with his cane." "I have to recite all of them to him tomorrow, and I can't remember one of them." John put down his spoon. He'd eaten enough of the mess on his plate to stop his hunger. He couldn't force down any more. "Halyards, sheets, braces, stays, they're all a muddle in my head." "It's not so hard," Kit said quietly in his ear. "There's some on this ship with wooden pegs for heads. If they can learn them, you can. I'll show you later if you like." "Did Mr. Higgins send you up aloft, John?" Tom called down the table. John shook his head. "Oh, that's a shame. It's good and calm here in the Forth. Tomorrow we'll be out in the open sea. There'll be a fine old swell on her with this wind that's blowing. Wouldn't like to go up my first time when she's bucking about like a—" "You hold your tongue, Tom Todd," growled Jabez, who had approached the boys' table unseen from the other side, when Mr. Torse and his crew were eating at another table. "Eat your victuals and bide quiet." Tom subsided, but when Jabez returned to his dinner, he looked at John with shining eyes. "You don't need to be scared, John. There's no need at all. It's grand up there. They'll only let you go halfway up anyway, till you're strong enough to pull in the stale. I'm to be one of the top men. You've seen them, haven't you? The only ones who may wear the scarlet waistcoats on the ship. They work right up high, in the topgallant sails. The top men are the best. Everyone respects them. They—" His enthusiastic voice ran on, but John was no longer listening. The rise and fall of the ship, the stuffiness and stench overlaid with the smell of the food, combining to horrible effect. He stood up from the table, holding his hand to his mouth, and just made it to the nearest gun port, from where he vomited his dinner down into the sea.